We've gone through these difficult times. We've just ordered up a military parade. I remember, back when the Red Sox won in 2000.
Countries do that.
Oh, wait. That's the Soviet Union and North Korea, isn't it?
Something like that. They have the marches and,
they all use the heads. Yeah,
the leader watches it, looks at them.
So the president, this is very autocratic. And who would ever guess this president would be prone to autocratic tendencies?
Would want a military parade. Can you imagine if it happens, though, just as you play it out, the images are going to be kind of Peronista, but there will be counter protests, right? This will actually be a thing.
This is.
It will not go off without incident, right? There will be a.
We just don't do military.
Yes, military parades
in this country.
It's not part of our grand American tradition.
Well, President Trump has asked his top military commanders to plan a military parade in Washington.
You have to tell him.
A Pentagon spokesman confirms that the department is, quote, looking at possible dates.
To tell him no.
Adding that November 11th is Veterans Day, and that's a possibility.
I have a great idea.
Yeah.
Why don't we get, and I'm dead serious, why don't we get Vietnam vets, some Korean vets, get vets from the wars to march, those that have already been to war, perhaps those who are still carrying the scars of those wars. Let them march and on Veterans Day, and we can applaud them. That's something that would be great.
I think that happens all over the United States now.
No, but I'm saying, why doesn't the president organize that?
Right.
Have the Pentagon organize that and have the largest veterans parade in American history, where veterans can come together from all of these wars and talk through the challenges they still are facing in peacetime 30, 40 years later.
I think this is more about power and being saluted.
Right.
It's not about actually respecting the sacrifices of people who love our country so much that they would lay their lives on the line.
A lot has happened over the past 14 months since Donald Trump was sworn in as president. This is the saddest thing
really
to my mind. I mean, we have been at war for 17 years. We have had nearly 2 decades of sacrifice and sorrow, borne by less than 1% of the American public.
Right.
The American military is the strongest, the proudest, the best in the world. The American military and the American people do not need a parade. We need peace.
Why doesn't the president direct the Pentagon to double down with the VA, John, to make sure that our men and women who are still suffering in Afghanistan, who are suffering from the scars of Afghanistan and from Iraq and from Vietnam, why doesn't he put his focus on us actually as a country taking care of the men and women who have already given their all?
You've got a PTSD crisis from the veterans who served here. We've got suicide, extraordinary plague of suicides among veterans who served, as Mike said. How about you take the millions, and it will be millions of dollars that's going to go into planning this alleged parade. Take that money, earmark it, and put it into PTSD counseling and services. Use that money to try to actually help the people who have already made these extraordinary sacrifices for the country.
How many suicides per day?
Yes, it's a horrifying number.
A year or two ago, we were well over 20 suicides a day from our men and women in uniform.
Let's bring in NBC News Pentagon correspondent Hans Nichols. What more can you tell us, Hans, about what's behind this request? Are we misunderstanding it?
No, you have it pretty clearly. The president gave a directive to the Pentagon. If there's one thing we know about the Pentagon, it's that they're a planning organization. And number two, they go ahead and when they get what they perceive to be directives or orders, we can hash out the exact language. If the president of the United States, their commander-in-chief, tells them to do something, they're going to do something. I got to tell you guys, the most surprising aspect of this story to me was the speed with which the Pentagon confirmed the Washington Post scoop. It was about 12 hours ago this story broke in the Post. There's a whole bunch of reporters who are running around trying to match it. Normally, it's very difficult to figure out what was said inside the tank, and that's where this order was given about 2 weeks ago, according to the Post. Pentagon just said, yeah, sure, we're looking at dates. It's out there. It's a request, and we're going to figure out how to do it. So they're a planning organization, and they follow orders, and that has implications across a whole lot of policy arenas.
Well, Hans, so I would guess, maybe I'm wrong, but Secretary Mattis, a man who was in Iraq from the very beginning, who warned American leaders not to go to Iraq, who warned American leaders against Bremer's de-Baathification, who was there in Fallujah when hell rained down in Fallujah. I would guess that General Mattis would probably be the first person concerned about this. Any chance that we would see pushback from the secretary?
I think it's unlikely. I think when Secretary Mattis, a former Marine Corps general, came up through, spent almost 40 years in the Marine Corps, when he gets orders, he follows them. Now, the fundamentals of the relationship between Mattis and Trump is that Mattis challenges Trump, right? Those were the rules written when they had their first interview. Mattis challenged him on 3 things: on Russia, on torture, one other issue as well, NATO, I think the importance of NATO. So Mattis has shown a willingness to challenge the president and to disagree with him. It just seems like this is an order that was given from the president. President is clearly likes military parades. He talked about this back in 2011.
Right, but do you think, Hans, it may have been leaked because they want to get this genuinely bad idea out immediately? Yes. So these kind of conversations are had. You say things like this never leak. Well, they got it out fast. Do you think it was to kill it?
My reading of the Pentagon on this is that they don't think it's a bad idea. And it doesn't seem like the White House thinks like it's a bad idea. They think this is celebrating the troops, celebrating America's military might. You remember how impressed President Trump was when he saw that Bastille Day extravaganza when he was in France. It was 2 hours. He's talked about this mess. It's not entirely unprecedented. In 1991, there's a Gulf War parade.
Maybe he should move to France if he likes what they do in France better than here.
Yeah, you know, I don't know how if he'd order 1 or 2 baguettes, right? That's the trick when you're living in France. Just always say 2 baguettes, because you can't ever remember when it's or une.
You would eat them with a fork and knife and white gloves.
You know,
but if you've seen how he eats pizza, the president eats pizza.
Oh, I've seen it.
God,
Yeah.
NBC's Hans Nichols.
Hey, Hans, as always.
I've seen how Hans eats pizza too, and it's not pretty.
You know, he doesn't use straight to the mouth.
Nichols says he's a thug.
So, yeah. So
a government shutdown and a military
Duffy.
parade.
Yeah, Michael Duffy
Doesn't seem like a good mix.
How fascinating! Of all the people that you talk about in the President's Club, Ike and his open suspicions about the military that he served in all of his life. Of course, the famous warning at the end of the presidency about the military-industrial complex. This seems like, of all the presidents you have studied, the one that knew of the horrors of war the most. Dwight Eisenhower would think this was an absolutely horrific, un-American idea.
Yeah, I think he'd say it was over the top and ill-timed. But asking around the Pentagon yesterday, I can tell you that it is quickly confirmed. Hans is right. And I'm beginning to think it might happen. I put more stock, Joe, in your theory that the Pentagon isn't as for it as they might seem. I think they dragged their feet on this since we first heard him ask about it almost 6 months ago. And they finally obviously said, okay, we're looking at dates. That doesn't mean that they're like, you know, or putting tanks on rail cars yet and sending them east. There are no tanks, by the way, anywhere near the city. It might turn out to be something just like with troops, but I think you can no longer imagine that this isn't a possibility. A number of our presidents have been trained in the military. Carter went to Annapolis, Ike, of course. But President Trump, let's not forget, went to military school. He has a love of the uniform. He's surrounded himself with generals. He talks about his generals as if they're his. He obviously likes, as Mika said, being saluted because he imagines that generals will do exactly as he says. In fact, the military is much more clever than that. And they have their own way of slow walking things. And this is, I think they've tried to slow walk this. But now they're past the point of being able to take that tactic. I think there is the reason it was so easy to confirm is I think they'd like to start a conversation about whether this is a good idea. And they've done that. But they are not passive players here in this conversation at all.
Well, clearly the president was impressed and admired the Bastille Day parade in France. It took 2 hours in length and it was over, and it was impressive. How about if the President of the United States takes 2 hours and walks through Arlington National Cemetery, and he would recognize the responsibilities of what it means to be commander-in-chief, what it means to send young people to war.
I'm not being, this really is not meant as being personal But if he would just visit, the thousands of American soldiers who died in the jungles of Vietnam while he got 5 deferments, even if he would lay a wreath at the in Arlington, the graves of, I think, 20 to 25 American soldiers who died the week that he was graduating from college. I think Americans actually would be far more moved by that than a showy parade that is un-American, that is the sort of thing that autocrats usually do, and that we just don't have a tradition of doing in this country.
50 years ago this week, the Marines were in Hue.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can go back 50 years, and Tet was 50 years ago last week. And yeah, now, and he was, in college.
5 deferments.
I don't think he
five deferments. And, even Ike was even suspicious of generals that wore all the medals. What did he call it? Fruit salad?
Yeah.
He had one. Didn't need to show anything else. He was understated. The man that helped save Europe and Western civilization, who drove the Nazis back across Europe. Donald Trump, I know he doesn't read. And his own chief of staff said that the 10-page Democratic memo was too long for him to read. I guess he circled back and said he'll get him to read it. That somebody should give him an oral history of Dwight Eisenhower. And before he starts talking about military parades.
There's got to be a History Channel thing you could watch.
Still ahead on Morning
The Gorilla
Joe.
Channel.
We're actually
That's a History Channel.
kidding.
That Gorilla Channel thing may have been the greatest fake meme in internet history. I wanted to see the gorilla. I believed it for like about half a minute.
Yeah.
I was like,
more than
channel.
that.
I was like,
who knew there was a Gorilla Channel?
Like, where is this Gorilla Channel? I was about to call DirecTV.
Yeah, where's that on my dial?
I
want to
don't
check
have
that
the
out.
Gorilla. The parts were just the gorillas are fighting. Yeah. I tell you, it's so much. This is some reality TV show. If we survive it, and
it'll be funny in
there
retrospect.
is still a constitutional republic at the end of all of this. We may look back at it one day and cry.
Still ahead on Morning Joe, that's a real boost in the morning. The White House Chief of Staff launches a broadside at dreamers, calling some of them too lazy to sign up for the government program. We're going to play that for you. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.